This afternoon for lunch, I had a salad that was basically broccoli and kale, but then with a bunch of like cheese and dressing and bacon on it. So it was like kind of healthy, but also like totally not healthy. And that's basically how I feel about Merrick Garland. I will say, just first of all, I really love the name Merrick Garland. It sounds like if the Lord of the Rings universe had boy bands, like he'd be the front man of the biggest one. Also, I feel like just looking at this picture of him, he would probably look perfectly at home in an infomercial for a new way to pick things up off the floor without bending over. He wouldn't be the guy using the thing, he'd be the guy like trying to bend over. Like, oh no, I can't get down. Oh well. So an inauspicious start to the next possible member for the most powerful seat of government. So as you know, the situation here is Antonin Scalia died, super conservative justice, and immediately the Senate Republicans, Mitch McConnell especially, came out and said we're not going to consider any Obama nominee for this position because the people should have a voice in making this decision, and he's on the way out, so he no longer represents the people. And then Obama has a couple strategies for how he could respond to this. Basically, he could either pick a really liberal guy who's like, well, fuck it, they're not going to approve him anyways. I'm just going to go with this crazy person who'd be awesome and is going to make everyone be really super excited about what's possible. Or he could nominate a basically Republican centrist who would, make them look bad for not accepting him and also would make nobody in the world happy. And of course, he went with the second one. So right off the bat, I want to be clear. My gut and like what my feelings were telling me to do was to not like this guy. So I'm going to try to be as impartial as I can, but I'm not very happy with this choice. Also, this is very much a preliminary. I mean, this guy is about to get the most public colonoscopy of his history. You can get shorter running for president. So we're going to learn a lot about this guy. And for now, this is, 6 hours after the announcement. We have a basic, he was on the short list for replacing David Souter in 2010. So, we were ready to go with investigating this guy. But for the most part, we have not an intense amount of knowledge about this guy. So here's roughly a roundup of what I could find based on what we know already. Merrick Brian Garland, he was the chief judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit since 1997, appointed by Bill Clinton. Garland graduated summa cum laude as valedictorian from Harvard College, graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Law School, then served as a law clerk for some dude none of us know, and then Justice William J. Brennan, Jr. of the Supreme Court. Then he went to practice corporate litigation at Arnold and Porter and worked as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Department of Justice. So he's from a Chicago suburb. His mother was a director of volunteer services at Chicago's Council for Jewish Elderly. His father headed Garland Advertising, which was a small business he ran out of the family home. His grandparents actually left this place called the Pale of Settlement. I've never heard before, but it's like this part of Russia, of old imperial Russia, where they would let Jews live permanently. So they fled anti-Semitism to come to America hoping for a better life, and now their grandkid is looking like he might be on the Supreme Court. So kind of cool story there. A lot is about to be made of the fact that he's an old white guy. A lot of people were hoping for some kind of, boundary breaking appointment. And I think, I'm going to talk about that a little more in a minute, but this is like the whitest dude ever, and yet he comes from a history of oppression. Obviously, he benefits from white privilege in a lot of ways, but it seems to me that this idea that a guy who looks like he didn't become an accountant because he was too white possibly can understand the struggles of the underprivileged. So when we start talking about his story as a lawyer, everyone seems to start with his role investigating the Oklahoma City bombing as a Deputy Attorney General Jamie Gorelick's principal deputy. And so as in that role, he was the supervisor of these investigations. He also investigated the Unabomber and the Atlantic Olympics bombing in '96. And the reason that's getting a lot of play is because in the announcement, Obama made this statement here about his role in the investigation, how he handled it. He said, "But perhaps most important is the way he did it. Throughout the process, Merrick took pains to do everything by the book. When people offered to turn over evidence voluntarily, he refused, taking the harder route of obtaining the proper subpoenas instead, because Merrick would take no chances that someone who murdered innocent Americans might go free on a technicality." And everyone's pulling that Merrick would take no chances that someone who murdered innocent Americans might go free on a technicality. And they're turning it into this thing of like, technicality? You mean the Constitution? because that's quite a technicality there, sir. But the reality of what happened is there were, the Oklahoma City body was terrible. Everyone hated it. So there were all these like truck drivers and companies that were associated that were just like, yes, please take our records, catch this motherfucker, convict him. And Merrick was like, you know what? Okay, we're going to subpoena so that there's no problems later with someone saying that, the evidence was bad. So it is kind of admirable, right? I mean, it's, that's a good job, Mr. Merrick. Except here's a New York Times article about him and especially about how that case affected him. And it says, for example, in cases in 2003 and 2007, the court was divided on whether to suppress certain evidence on the ground that police officers had obtained it as a result of an allegedly unconstitutional search. In both cases, another Democratic appointee sided with the defendant, while Judge Garland voted to allow prosecutors to use the evidence. So everyone's bringing up this Oklahoma thing like he's, such a staunch defender of justice. When in fact, it seems like he's a little bit more, yeah, go prosecutors, do what you got to do to get these people in jail. So let's go a little bit more into his history as a judge. And this is SCOTUS blog, a great source for information on the Supreme Court. And they say, Judge Garland's record demonstrates that he is essentially the model neutral judge. He is acknowledged by all to be brilliant. His opinions avoid unnecessary sweeping pronouncements. Also, Judge Garland is likely to have an immediate influence on the court because he's well known to the justices and is likely most respected by them collectively, particularly the more conservative judges. So on the one hand, we have this guy who can, get in there and make a difference and have an influence and really, get shit done. On the other hand, he's not going to be doing, gay marriage or civil rights or shit like that. He's just going to, make a difference of towing the line. And it seems like, yeah, they do pretty much agree with him already. Of the 7 cases reviewed by the Supreme Court in which he stated or strongly implied a position, the justices agreed with him in 4, which may seem like a lot, but then you got to remember that's of the cases they decided to hear. In all the other cases, they were like, yeah, no, he's probably right. One case he was involved with that's getting talked about a lot involves Guantanamo and whether the federal government can, just hold people there without charges. And he pretty much upheld the Bush administration's position, saying that federal district courts lack habeas corpus jurisdiction over Guantanamo detainees' claims, so they can't step in and hear them, even if they wanted to try them. And the Supreme Court would go on to reverse that, which is everyone kind of is taking as like, ooh, he's a little conservative on that one, huh? But the thing is, and I'm going to quote here, it is difficult to criticize Judge Garland or infer too much from his vote in the case, because there's a significant argument that the panel's opinion was compelled by then extant Supreme Court precedent, as illustrated by the fact that no member of the D.C. Circuit Court called for an en banc review of the panel's ruling. En banc review is like they're all going to hear it instead of just a small committee. Basically, everyone agreed with him. So yeah, everyone thought he was right on the case. But this is also kind of the point of he's just the guy who just toes the damn line. Just goes in there and does what he's supposed to do. Then there's the same thing on the case about D.C.'s handgun ban. The D.C. court invalidated the ban with one of those panels, and he called for the full review. And then just did not take a formal position on the merits of the case. Like, what the fuck, dude? But so then they go on to say, even if he had concluded the statute was constitutional, that would have, been the right thing. So basically, he wanted to hear this case for no reason. I don't understand. So the D.C. Circuit Court is often seen as like a training ground for the Supreme Court. And part of that is it's got jurisdiction over the federal government, so it gets a lot of regulatory cases, but it gets very few hot-button social issues like abortion, the death penalty, stuff like that. So we don't really know much about how he feels on those two pretty big deal issues. What we do know is he rarely votes in favor of criminal defendants' appeals of their convictions. And then in 10 cases, he disagreed with his more liberal colleagues to adopt a position more favorable to the government. As far as civil rights stuff goes, he hasn't really had many cases like that, and so it's difficult to say whether he's really, pro-civil rights or anti-civil rights. But however, when he does get those kind of cases, he generally sides in favor of the plaintiff, which would be the pro-civil rights position. And there's this line here, the unanimous rulings in which Judge Garland participated similarly reflect a concern that civil rights plaintiffs receive an appropriate day in court. So that's pretty good. That's, go Merrick. As far as open government goes, apparently his rulings reflect a preference for open government, which is good, especially if you think about all the kind of behind the scenes terrorism, security stuff. Seems like he'd be on the right side of those. But overall, this guy is 63 years old. He's the oldest Supreme Court nominee since 1971. And yet there's a startling lack of really serious evidence of what he believes. And obviously part of the reasoning for that is they want to avoid giving the Republicans meat to attack him with. But it also kind of suggests that, I don't know, dude's kind of a nothing burger. Take a stand, man, do some shit. Also, there's the thing of, he's that old, he's probably not going to be on the court for that long. So it's almost kind of like Obama's just, punting here, I don't know, fuck it. I just want to make the Republicans look bad. Just throw fucking Merrick up there. I don't care. And so that does bring us to this question of like, is he going to get confirmed? I mean, is he even going to get a hearing? Because they're saying they're not going to give him a hearing. In fact, Mitch McConnell called him this morning and was like, look, just want to let you know you're not going to get a hearing. Didn't want to waste your time having a meeting because it's so out of the question. Sorry, man. But Paul Waldman makes this point on the Washington Post website that of the like names on the public shortlist for this appointment, Garland is the one whose appointment most clearly portrays Republicans as obstructionists when they refuse to consider him. That will not only help Hillary Clinton when she argues that Republicans are unreasonable and irresponsible, but it will also put some vulnerable Senate Republicans in an uncomfortable position. So it seems like it's kind of a play aimed at the Republicans and just at making them look bad, and it's like, not that he's calling their bluff, but that he's just being like, oh, okay. He's like believing their bluff and being like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna make you look bad then. But the other possible read of it is that he's like honestly trying to give them someone they can approve. Which kind of begs the question, like, what's the point of getting your nominee in if you're gonna bend over backwards to get someone the other side would like? Like, fuck it, just let them appoint someone next semester. Next session, this isn't school. But then there's also this point here, Garland's already had a full career, and it's probably his last opportunity to get nominated to the court. So he may have been more willing than other potential nominees to go through this whole process, even though there's like no chance he's actually going to get confirmed. So it could honestly have just been a case of, like, well, fuck it, no one else is going to want this. But, a lot of people were hoping if we're in this position, and we're in this position where no one's going to get through, why not, go for some door-in-the-face negotiation, throw up someone who is crazy liberal, and maybe like, like a black woman or something, so that we set the bar of what they should expect way up here, and then the next president can kind of walk through down under here with someone kind of liberal. And it also, sort of breaches the ground a little bit for maybe other, black women or something, or whatever group you choose. And that's part of why people are so pissed that he's like just a white dude. And there's some merit in that, right? Like, there should be more diversity on the court. There should be more different perspectives. I mean, they are the guys who are deciding fucking everything, really, when you get down to it. And it would be good to not just have a whole bunch of white dudes and then one Hispanic lady and a black dude. And then fucking Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's just baller. But then also, I feel like if we're in this place where we don't believe that other people can understand the perspectives of people whose experiences are different from theirs, then the whole principle of the Supreme Court is fucked. Because there's 9 guys on there, and absolutely they're going to be hearing cases that are vastly different from their experiences, no matter how diverse you make that group of 9 people. So I think we kind of have to assume that the requirement should be that it's a person who can put themselves in different perspectives, not necessarily that there's someone who has different perspectives. And I also think, Obama especially, but just liberals in general, get hit with race baiting a lot, and it isn't necessarily the worst thing to dodge that punch by just tossing out a white guy. But that said, I'm a white guy, so fucking who cares what I think on this topic? I mean, seriously, I bet it would be pretty fucking awesome to see someone who looks like you nominated for the Supreme Court if that's never happened before in your life. Although I gotta say, if you're a sculpture of a man from the Iowa Butter Fair that's recently come to life, it'd be pretty cool to see someone who looks like you nominated to the Supreme Court. So anyways, that's what I got on Merrick. He seems like a pretty decent dude. I mean, I don't really have a problem with him. It's just, another instance of Obama not really being a liberal and just kind of trying to be a centrist, trying to do what's going to make everyone happy, and not understanding that that's not the game the other side is playing, and as a result, getting his fucking ass kicked. So on that, I just want to leave you with this Onion story. Defiant Mitch McConnell holds Merrick Garland's severed head aloft in front of Capitol building. All right, take it easy, guys.